Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm super excited for this video because we are collaborating with G.V, and this is going to be a fun video to learn more about LocalStack Neptune development with G.V. I am Nancy. I'm a DevRel engineer at LocalStack. But before we move ahead, I would love to know more about you, Arthur. So can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name's Arthur Bouchard. I'm the creator and the main developer of G.V. It's a tool available for Apache Tinkerpop databases, particularly Amazon Neptune and LocalStack Neptune. It's a tool that I started making a few years ago when I started working with graph databases for the first time and realized it's quite difficult actually to get started because we don't really have that integrated development environment experience that allows you to just get your queries running. So one day I just kind of set out to do something about it. And a few years later, we're here today to talk about how it works with LocalStack Neptune.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm pretty sure that we can easily query, visualize, and model the graph data interactively with this. I'm excited to learn more about this. But before we move ahead, for the new users who are new to LocalStack and G.V, maybe we can just let our viewers know more about LocalStack and G.V. So I'll start with LocalStack. So LocalStack is a cloud service emulator that runs in a single container on your laptop or maybe in your CI environment. And with LocalStack, you can run your AWS applications entirely on your local machine. So we can say that it's a drop-in replacement of AWS. You do not need to connect to the remote cloud provider. It does support developers with Neptune locally. And Neptune is a fully managed, highly available, and scalable graph database service which is offered by AWS. It is designed for storing and querying the highly connected data, which requires the complex relationship modeling, such as social networks or maybe the fraud detection. So, yeah, LocalStack allows you to use the Neptune APIs. You can also see our coverage over here, over the documentation. You can see the Neptune's integration with LocalStack. We also have sample in LocalStack Pro samples, one of the simple demo application which illustrates the use of Neptune Graph DB queries locally. So you can have a look over here in the LocalStack Pro samples. You can have a look here, and yep, this will really help you to get started with Neptune. So with that, I am interested to know more about G.V from you, Arthur.
That's really cool. I think actually when you're saying this, I realized one thing that people are going to love about LocalStack Neptune is how easy it is to connect it. Those that have used Amazon Neptune will know that trying to bypass the VPC that Neptune is hosted in is very difficult. And I know for sure that having used LocalStack, you can just get connected right away. It's so much easier. But with that in mind, G.V is what I call a Gremlin integrated development environment, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it really means is it's a software executable that you can install on any major operating systems, Windows, macOS, or Linux, that aims to provide this developer experience with your database where you can very easily, manage, query, visualize, and edit your data in your database. So if you've used databases before, and maybe you've been using, for instance, relational databases like SQL, you'll know there's always been established software to do all these things. There's SQL Server and MySQL Workbench, et cetera, et cetera. But for graph databases, and particularly in the Apache Tinkerpop space, there's just never really been an established solution. And this is really what G.V is here to do, is to really provide that essential tool for everyone, from beginner level, just getting started with graph databases and trying to grasp the concept of graph and the languages like Gremlin, to advanced users start just trying to profile and debug really complex queries or visualize their data, demonstrate it to stakeholders. This is what G.V is here to do. Once you're set up with G.V, it's a pretty straightforward process for adding your connections. It's compatible with a whole bunch of databases, as I've mentioned earlier. If it's compatible with Apache Tinkerpop and if it uses the Gremlin language, G.V will work with it. Of course, today, the one we're interested in is LocalStack Neptune and Amazon Neptune to an extent as well. Of course, because, if you're going to start using G.V with LocalStack in development, for instance, you'll know that you can then also use it in production or staging, whatever intermediate environments you might have on Amazon Neptune as well. With all that said, how how about we just jump into a little demo where I can show how to connect to LocalStack and what GW looks like with it as well.
Yeah, excited for this because I know that interacting with the Amazon Neptune can be really challenging. So due to lack of easy to use tools. So let's see, how it goes.
Excellent. So I'm just going to switch over to my GW screen here. So just a quick mention, I've got LocalStack running on my device. I've pre-created a Neptune cluster using the instructions that Nancy's just mentioned earlier on one of those blog posts. What I'm going to do is just going to show you how easy it is to connect to your LocalStack database and then what you can expect from there. So you can see here, if I just create a new database connection, we're going to select LocalStack. We're going to enter a host name, which is a localhost.localstack.cloud. Now the port number was 4510 in this case. It's indicated when you create your Neptune cluster. I'm going to quickly test the connection. You'll see we're all good to go. We're going to go ahead and create that. Now, as of just now, I've not actually created any data in my database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly just paste a little snippet with some information that I'm actually going to extract from a little in-memory graph. Apologies. There you go. So I'm just going to quickly export this information right there as a Gremlin query, and I'm just going to create it into LocalStack. There we go. Now I've basically just added a really simple graph in LocalStack here, and it's really to illustrate what you can do with it. So you'll see I've got some software and some person vertices, and they're connected by a few edges. So for instance, we've got created and we've got knows. Now, GW is going to do a whole bunch of stuff when you connect to it. And the first thing that it does is it's going to model your data. So when you're adding data into your database, GW is going to understand what's in it. And it's going to be able to use that understanding of your data to present you with a whole suite of useful functionality as you're writing your queries or trying to visualize your data. So for instance, right here is our data model viewer, which allows us to see the structure of the data in the database. It's very useful to see at a glance what your database contains without having to actually see all of the data, just the structure. We've also got the Graph Data Explorer, which is actually a simple way of just viewing the data without having to write a query. So you'll see here that it's just loaded the data from my graph, and I've got the ability to filter my data. I can generate some queries very easily just to see, specific parts of the graph. I'm not going to get into too much details here, but you can also, for instance, style your graph. You can say, hey, show me the name on the graph display for the person vertex, same for the software vertex. And what it does, it just allows you to very quickly make your graph a little bit more useful to read. So you can see visually now, this is Peter. Peter has created, we'll change the style on that as well. We'll say label right there. There we go. And you'll see now, Peter has created LOP, and Mark was created LOP, etc., etc. So you can very quickly make your graph useful to derive insights from. But then the main thing about GW, of course, is that it is an integrated development environment. And so what that means is you can write queries with it. You can write queries with it with a lot of useful tools. And one of the main challenges with graph databases is understanding the concept and the language. And GW does a few things to help with that. So first of all, it gives you all these really useful recommendations as you're typing queries. So you can see as I'm typing it, it's going to come up with suggestions, but it's also including the Gremlin documentation that you can see here on the side, so that as you're typing your query, you don't have to constantly go back to check the documentation and see how it works. It's all right there on the screen for you. And if I'm trying to type a query, you'll see also that GW is aware of what's in my data, right? So for instance, GW.hasLabel says, find me all of the vertices with a specific label. And we've got two of them. We've got person and we've got software, which are presented to us right there. That really just allows you as a user to quickly get to your information, to not have to worry about remembering the structure of your data as you're writing your query, G.V will do that for you. Makes it a lot easier to write your queries. You're not wasting time trying to remember what your data is structured like or what the Gremlin language is like. It's all right there on the screen for you. You can just get to writing your queries and get to just playing with your data. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot of other things you can do. I'm not going to go through all of it. For instance, you can edit your data interactively, which is also really useful if you want to quickly change something. You can create vertices and edges. We'll not have time today to show it all, but if you go and give G.V a try, you'll find access to all these features, and it's very easy to get started. So I'm just going to leave it at that just now. How about we maybe just cover some frequently asked questions about LocalStack and G.V just to get people a better idea of how this all works together and what we can do with it. So I guess I can maybe start here if you want, Nancy. I was going to send you. So G.V and LocalStack work together, and I guess the question would be what solve together exactly for Amazon Neptune users.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think together these are very nice. It provides a great developer experience, Arthur, and I really love the UI. And there are so many things which I can do with the G.V interface, graphical interface. This is really amazing. With this, I think we can touch upon the FAQs. But before we move to that, I just wanted to make sure that you've used LocalStack instance, and just want to make sure that if any of the user is looking forward to get started with LocalStack, they can refer to our documentation to get started with the LocalStack. They can check out the LocalStack Academy videos. Also, if you're specifically looking how to create a Neptune cluster, get started with this, you can check out this documentation page. So I have a question for you, Arthur. So I mean, as you mentioned that you're eager to discuss about the common problems that G.V and LocalStack can solve together for Amazon Neptune users. So I would love to know that, according to you, what are the different problems which you have encountered till now and which you think can really solve the problems? Yeah.
So one question I've seen quite often from Amazon Neptune users is like, they'll use it in production and it's great, but how do I do integration testing on Neptune? If I want to run this from, I don't know, a CI/CD system, for instance, I'm going to have to worry about figuring out how to expose my cluster to the CI/CD system, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one of the things that LocalStack is just really great at, is just allowing users to replicate that Neptune functionality and feel without having to actually go on AWS. And with G.V on top of that, what we can then do is just have a completely consistent developer experience, and user experience interacting with the graph space, but also not sacrifice on the behavior. It behaves the exact same. You can essentially just replicate everything and not have to worry about whether your tests aren't going to match what Neptune actually does. It will, which is super, super helpful. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, the other thing that's worth asking is, when you're using G.V, some people will ask, hey, I'm using G.V, but it's like, what does G.V actually do with my data, for instance, right? And it's kind of similar, I guess, to LocalStack in a sense, right? Because LocalStack being a cloud emulator, you're running it all on your environment. It all belongs within your enterprise, within your network. And that's very similar with G.V. Now, G.V is not a Docker container. It's a software executable, plain old. But the advantage is that it's not something that we are deploying on a website that you're then going to have to entrust your data to us with. G.V just runs on your device. It connects to your database from your device locally. Nothing goes out of your corporate network. It's all happening in there, which means it's extremely secure by design. If you compare it maybe to other solutions, I might say, for instance, go host your knowledge graph on this website. Trust us. You might find actually that could be a problem. But between LocalStack and G.V, you're not going to have that problem. You actually own everything that is running your infrastructure and the data as well that's being accessed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's more secure because it's all local. I was just going to come to that question, but you've already mentioned about it.
A bit too eager, I guess.
Yeah, but definitely. I mean, I really loved when you mentioned about the dev and test loop. The whole feedback loop becomes very efficient when you are doing things with LocalStack and G.V together. Because just imagine that you have some changes and you want to see the changes reflected on the cloud, and then you have to go through that whole process of pushing the things in your CI environment, and then pushing the things onto the testing environment in AWS or any other cloud provider. I guess this gets removed by using LocalStack with G.V, and G.V is definitely providing great developer experience. So yeah, this is really nice. I'm really amazed with the thing which you mentioned, that people have questions like, how can we run this locally? So yeah,
it comes
it's
up
really
very often, actually, and I'll mention that maybe after. We've got community spaces, I think, that we're respectively involved in, and some of these community spaces, those questions, you can literally just see them there. People are like, hey, I want to run that to locally. What can I do? And usually like, just use LocalStack. You're sorted.
Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, would you also like to point about like how G.V is compared to other solutions? I mean, one of the factors is like security. I mean, do you want to touch upon other factors?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So it's a strange space when it comes to Apache Tinkerpop. There's something of a lack of solutions available. But I'll mention a few just in passing. I think Amazon Neptune, for instance, has their own graph notebook, which they actually offer you to create when you create a Neptune cluster, but it comes at a bit of a cost actually when you tally all up. But Graph Notebook, it's not really an integrated development environment. It's more meant to provide a sort of Jupyter notebook experience with your data. So think data analysis, that kind of stuff. It won't have all those query suggestions. It won't have the sort of large graph display that allows you to display a lot of elements, but it will be pretty useful for running ad hoc graph analytics queries, which is something that, for instance, G.V doesn't do. I think when it comes to G.V, we're really trying to emulate that IDE experience that any database user is expecting when they use any other database. And then coming back to my point there with SQL, anyone that uses SQL, when they show you SQL, they're not going to show you a command line terminal showing them writing the SQL command query on command line. It's going to be a screenshot of MySQL Workbench or the dbeaver or DB Visualizer or something else like this. And that's basically what G.V aims to do. It wants to become this association to like graph databases. Other graph solutions like Neo4j, for instance, come with their own. But because Apache Tinkerpop is an open source framework, it doesn't really have this built-in ecosystem. It's relying on, people, I guess, like us to provide these additional tools and implementations to give developers and data analysts, users a much better experience interacting with their data.
Yeah. And what other different graph databases are supported by G.V?
There's a whole bunch. Generally speaking, anything that supports the Gremlin language over WebSocket works. But if we're kind of going through the list of the main ones, there's Amazon Neptune, of course, LocalStack Neptune as well, as we've just mentioned. There's Azure Cosmos DB, which has a Gremlin API. Aerospike Graph, which has actually been launched just last year with G.V as sort of the default solution with it. Then we've got Janus Graph, extremely popular open source implementation of Apache Tinkerpop that adds a little bit of extra goodies like the ability to specify your storage backend or have a graph data schema. There's plain old Gremlin Server, ArcadeDB, DataStax, Enterprise Graph, and a bunch of others. There's a lot of them. But generally speaking, if a database supports the Gremlin query language over WebSockets, then G.V will just work with it. And those solutions that we support at once are explicitly supported with like all of the additional features that come with it that might be available, for instance, with LocalStack and with others as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think with this, we come to an end. Thank you so much for your time, Arthur, and the great demo. With this, I just want to let you know that all our users, that if you try this out and if you have any questions for LocalStack, you can join our Slack channel. You can also ask the questions in Discuss forum. And where do you think, Arthur, where can people find G.V community?
Yeah, of course. So we don't have our own community spaces, but we are very active in the Apache Tinkerpop Discord server, which is itself a pretty big community for all sorts of graph users and actually quite a lot of Neptune users in there. We're also available, just directly by email, support@g.v.com. We're always aiming to give our users the best time possible. We know it can be a bit daunting at first working with graph databases, so we're kind of here to help. And I was just going to mention, of course, that the first thing that you can and should do after you've watched this is just go ahead and give it a try. You can get a free trial of G.V and you can get a free trial of LocalStack as well. So you can give all this a shot. You'll get a couple of weeks at least, probably more with LocalStack, to just look at all this, give yourself a little tour of all the functionality, and hopefully find that it's all just very useful working together.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I'm going to paste all these links in the description below so that our users can know that where to ask the questions directly. So thank you so much, Arthur, for your time.
Thank you, Nancy. That was great. Thank you, everyone.